No one chooses slavery. Instead, you're offered something that sounds legitimate. By the time you find out what it really is, it's too late. Through manipulation, threats, violence, or confinement, your freedom is taken away. Most people in slavery earn nothing. They're exploited physically, psychologically, and often sexually. As many as 40 million people work in slavery today, more than ever in human history. Modern slavery wears many disguises. Take Aditi's case, for example. She lived in a village in North India. When she was 14, a man showed up offering the girls jobs in a factory in the south. It sounded good. They'd be trained how to spin and weave cotton. At the end of 3 years, they'd get a nice bonus. It started out like an adventure, 30 friends on a long bus trip, until they arrived. There was no training. Aditi was put to work 16 hours every day, sitting on the floor with loud machines. The factory was sweltering. The food was bad rice. Safety was non-existent. There was nothing to stop the girls from inhaling damaging fibres or even losing fingers in the machines. With no training, accidents were common. Some girls were even killed. None could bear to stay 3 years. When Aditi was too sick to keep working, she left with no money. Her injuries were not just physical. The trauma stays with her. Modern slavery appears in the worst forms of child labour, work that harms their health, physical or mental. 10 million children are trapped working in these conditions. And like all child labour, it takes away their opportunity for an education and a decent future. Modern slavery entraps all ages and all walks of life. Most often it's the poor and vulnerable. They have the same hopes for their lives and their families that we all do. Hope is a powerful deceiver when you're desperate, like it was for Tway in Myanmar. His family was desperately poor. Their crops were failing. Tway was chosen to work abroad and send money home. He found an agent who offered him a factory job in Thailand with a loan to cover the fees. But when he arrived, the deal had changed. There was no factory job and the loan was gathering interest. If he couldn't pay, they'd go after his family. He was forced to work on a fishing boat to pay off his debt. Once aboard, he was beaten into submission and worked constantly except for a few hours of rest. When Tway's shipmate complained, he was pushed overboard. There was no other escape. When the boat docked in port, he was locked below. He did not set foot on land for 17 years. Modern slavery is where one person has taken away another person's freedom to control their body, to refuse certain work, or to stop working. Freedom is taken away by threats, violence, coercion, deception, and abuse of vulnerability. Victims are controlled by another person. Their identity papers are taken away, keeping them from leaving. Some don't even know where they've been taken. Others stay because their families will be harmed. Modern slavery is found in every country in the world. People are working under slave labour in Australia. When Dai came from Taiwan for a working holiday in Brisbane, he didn't realise he was walking into a trap until the gate closed behind him. The suburban house held nearly 50 other victims, forced to work the phones all day, following a script for defrauding people in China. They took Dai's passport and told him if he tried to escape, they knew where his family lived. After months in confinement, he managed to get out of the house and flag down a passing car to get to a police station. 2 men were arrested and convicted of the crime of causing a person to enter into or remain in servitude. Slavery can happen here. Even when it's far away, it can be as close as the clothes we wear and the food we eat.
When most people think about how their t-shirt is made, they might look at the tag and go, oh, this was made in Bangladesh or Cambodia. And that's about all they know. But when you think about how any garment is made, it goes through multiple processes, and it's far more than just about the country where the final stage of manufacturing was done. To make a t-shirt, for example, you need to find out where the raw materials come from, which is usually cotton in a lot of t-shirts. which comes from where is that cotton farm that produces that raw material. And that cotton then gets ginned and then woven into fabric. So where is the fabric being woven and how are people being treated there? And then finally it makes its way to a factory where it's sewn into a t-shirt and then comes to us. At every stage of that supply chain, there's a risk that someone is being exploited or enslaved.
We'd hate to think the cotton Aditi spun and the tuna Tway caught could end up in our wardrobes and on our tables. Freedom is a human right. Everyone should be able to say no to a job they don't want or quit when they want to leave. We all deserve to be paid fairly and work in a safe environment. We're lucky enough to live in a country where most of us can take this for granted. How can we extend that right to everyone whose lives are influenced by our choices? We've only just begun.
I think now as a society, we've grown to better understand the path a good takes to get from its place of origin to our dinner table or to our handbag. You know, it's not good enough anymore for us to turn a blind eye to the fact that our mobile phones, our coffees, our computers could be tainted with modern slavery. And that's why it's so important and so wonderful, really, that Australia now has a Modern Slavery Act.
The Modern Slavery Act is now law in Australia. Businesses must account for their efforts to fight slavery at home and abroad.
Stop the Traffic Australia started campaigning on the Modern Slavery Act in 2011. At that time, we were asking for legislation around transparency in supply chains. We petitioned successive Attorneys General, and then there was a decision made by the government that there would be a joint parliamentary inquiry into whether Australia should have a Modern Slavery Act like the UK.
Modern slavery is an issue that impacts us right here in Australia, whether it's through what you buy for your food or your clothes or your goods you buy. It impacts about 15,000 estimated people in Australia, over 30 million in our region and over 40 million worldwide. We were able to get around that issue and realise on a bipartisan matter that we needed to tackle that issue in Australia and in the supply chains of Australian businesses and organisations. And it was really great to see that bipartisan effort across the chamber to come up with a final report that we agreed on and recommendations that we thought would be strong to tackle modern slavery, not only here in Australia but globally.
Most Australians would feel uncomfortable with the idea that they'd bought a product that involved slavery at some stage in its production. Over time, I think what this bill will do is put all Australians' minds at ease that when they buy a product, particularly from a large entity, that it will be free of any slavery.
The Modern Slavery Act is a major step from government, and the response from business will be critical in the fight against modern slavery. But how will they respond? That depends on us.
A Modern Slavery Act is really important, and it's an important expression of our Australian values. It's a first step though, we do need to do more, and we're really looking forward to building on the start that we've made. Most people don't realise that 2/3 of today's slaves are actually trapped in our region, and they're involved in the production of products that you and I might use every day. So they're our region, our products, our responsibility.
Consumers have a role to play in expressing their concerns about modern slavery to the retailers where they're buying products from, but also to the brands and the companies who are providing products. So I would say consumers can say what they want, that they want an end to modern slavery, but support the businesses who are making the greatest change.
Our choices matter. What we buy, what we share, and what we demand of the companies that get our business. Change will happen when they know we're talking, and we won't tolerate slavery anywhere. Together, we can shine a light on slavery and end it.
A friend of ours works in the United Nations as an advisor. He was in New York, and it was one of those winter days where the cacophony of sound of the taxis beeping and people shouting and screeching of brakes and tyres was just filling the air. But it started to snow, and when the snowflakes, the tiny, tiny little snowflakes hit the ground, they melted because the ground was warm. But it continued to flow until one snowflake on top of another snowflake started to make a difference, and they started to stay there. And then there was this thin white film covering the ground in Manhattan until more and more snow came down, and eventually these tiny snowflakes working together stopped the traffic. And the taxis went quiet. New York went quiet. When people work together, it's exactly the same way. When we all build on what others have done and we work together on this, we can stop the traffic, we can stop slavery, and we can really make a difference.